How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just cleaning. I was cleaning.
Cleaning?
Yeah. I just got back from the store. Say hi to my cat.
Oh, well, hello, kitty.
Yeah, I had to go to food school with my grandma because she's afraid to go by herself.
Yeah. Does she live with you guys?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you guys are doing well. Hi, Jasmine. Can't see you or hear you, but I know you're there. Hey, Adolfo.
Hi, Dr. Preston.
So since it's 1 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and start a conversation. And since we've never done this before, any of us, I'm kind of curious to know, we had a few people on Saturday, and so we'll start reading when we get there. But before that, I'm just wondering what's on your minds. How are people doing?
I think, oh, hi, Mr. Preston, it's me, Deanna. I think, like, so far it's been going okay. Just getting, like, used to, like, having to do everything, like, online now is, like, kind of difficult and, like, different, like, especially for, like, all my classes. Because, like, this morning I already had 2 other Zoom conferences, so getting, like, having to schedule it with everyone else. So, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, Vivica was nice enough to send me a couple of emails over the weekend. So what I did was I put up a Google Doc for all the teachers so that they could actually plug in their times and there wouldn't be so much overlap. And we're trying to get Alan Hancock courses to do the same thing so that you guys aren't stuck trying to figure all that out. I know that most of you have been using Zoom, but I'm letting the chat go open. So if you want to chat to everyone, you can do that. And if you want to send it to one other person, it's kind of like sending a note in class, and that's totally fine with me. Go ahead. Hey, Joseph, I just saw your post or your chat post about the journal topics. And, you know, we all kind of got caught off guard on that Friday. I said, turn in your journals, and then we didn't come back. So if I would have had my choice, I would have sent the journals home with you so that you could keep writing in your notebooks. But at this point, I think the most important thing is that you feel comfortable with your writing. So if you want to post them as a comment, or if you want to put them on your blog, that's fine. If you want to still write, though, because that's private and it's also just a different thing to write than type, I'm totally okay with that too. Whatever works best for you.
Okay.
So Joseph, say yes or something if that worked for you.
Yeah, it worked.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
And as far as everybody else, you know, Deanna, you mentioned other people are doing Zoom calls. How many of you have lots of teachers doing this stuff? Is
I
it
only have
pretty
one.
common?
I only have Miss Hennings and you. That's it.
Yeah, me too. I only have Hennings and
I
Dr.
have that
Preston.
one too.
Okay. And I know Madam Eckberg is, for those of you who are taking the French class, she's online.
Yeah, she just finished right now.
Okay.
Mr.
Yeah,
Wyman's doing them too.
Yeah,
Who's
Mr.
that?
Wyman's
As
doing
well.
it.
I couldn't quite hear. Who was that?
Mr. Wyman, he's doing them
Okay.
too.
Right on. And he and I exchanged emails this morning also, so I know he's doing that too. So as we go through this, if there's any way that I can be supportive, if there's a schedule conflict, if there's other stuff happening, you know where to find me. And in a way, for us, some of this doesn't change because the blog is still live. And, oh, Odalise, you can't hear anything? Let's see. Are you muting your video or your audio? Let's see, if somebody wants to chat in with Odalise and see if they can help her with her microphone. It looks like it's working for the rest of us, Odalise, so I don't know why that's happening. Did you guys all find the text for Fahrenheit 451 online?
Yeah.
Where I sort of cleverly embedded it, even though it's not copyright totally legal? Deanna, were you able to find it?
I was.
Okay. So I'm going to post some guiding questions on the text today. And for those of you who are in the AP section, on Friday, we're going to do a special section at 2 on Zoom. And I'm just going to do that once a week unless you need more help. But what I'm going to have us do on that is put your essays in not only your blogs, but also a Google Doc. And that way I can help edit. And I'm also going to edit using a tool called Kaizena, which allows me to do a voice recording edit so that you can actually hear me editing your document while you're reading it. And we'll just play with that and see what's comfortable for you. And hi, Miss Taves. So we left off in the reading, and I'm basically going to turn this Zoom conference into basically a book club. So this book, and by the way, nobody commented on the blog. Did you guys not get that Ray Bradbury tried to date my grandmother? Did you see the comic he wrote?
Yeah.
I wouldn't even be here if that comic was successful and she decided to go out with him instead of my grandfather. I wouldn't exist. If you didn't see that on the blog, check it out, because I promise I'm the only teacher who can offer you that. So I'm going to type to Odalise right now just before I get started. Can you hear now? And Deanna, just so that you know, you're showing up, not Diana, but Deanna, you're showing up as Galaxy S6. So I don't know why.
I am?
Yeah. Oh, there you are. Okay, now you're live.
Okay.
Who's Galaxy S6? I thought that was you.
I don't know who that is.
It's Galaxy S6 Edge. Well, you'll see it in the recording. Hopefully Odalise can hear, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with the text. So we left off, if you were reading on your own, great. You know that we've got this fireman named Guy Montag, and he's setting fires instead of putting them out, which is kind of bizarro. And if you remember in the fall, we read a short story by Ray Bradbury called The Pedestrian. Remember that story about Leonard Mead?
Yeah.
Well, he kind of based the book on that, but he wound up writing this thing in 10 days on a rented typewriter, which is a monster project. But we left off at that spot where they meet, and now we're kind of like wondering, all right, what's this conversation going to be about? So what I'm going to do is read kind of like I do in class, and if you want to interrupt me at any point with a question or a comment, do it. Hey, Michael. And then I'm going to post some guiding questions on the blog, and we'll check in again tomorrow and see where we're at. And in the meantime, as always, you can always send me an email or comment on the course blog, and I'll get it as a message.
Okay.
So before I start reading, I'm just going to pause for a second. Say, does anybody have any questions?
Dr. Preston, I do. Can you give a recap of what happened? Because I wasn't able to get in on the first meeting that we had.
Yeah.
Sure. And who am I hearing from right now? I can't tell.
This is Alva.
Alva, nice to see you.
Yeah.
Hear you. Okay,
You
cool.
too, Dr. Preston.
So as far as the action goes, all we really know is that we've got this fireman, and he's got to remember something in order to smile. We don't know what's wrong with him, but we know that he's got to like be happy on purpose. And he leaves his job and goes out into the night in his neighborhood and runs into this girl whose name is Clarice. And Clarice says, it's interesting the way she introduces herself. She says, I'm 17 and I'm insane.
Can you hear me?
What's that?
Okay.
This is fun. It's like teaching in the middle of a freeway. I can hear all of your voices. Let's do this as a general rule. If you are not saying something, why don't you mute your microphones, and that way the rest of us don't get all the noise from behind you. But as soon as you want to say something, go ahead and unmute your mic and bust in anytime. So Elva, does that answer your question? Not a
Yeah.
whole lot happened.
No, yeah, that is how. Thank
Okay,
you.
cool. So they're just at a point where they're starting to talk, and they realize that they have two very different ways of talking. The fireman's way of talking is kind of like high school way of talking. You know how when two people walk past each other in class and one person says, hey, how's it going? Which is a how question. And the other person says nothing much. And it's like, huh? But neither one of them say anything and they just walk on. Clarice is very different. She actually listens. So the last thing that we said yesterday was, he stopped walking. You are an odd one, he said, looking at her. Haven't you any respect? I don't mean to be insulting. It's just, I love to watch people too much, I guess. Well, doesn't this mean anything to you? He tapped the numerals 451 stitched on his charged sleeve. Yes, she whispered. She increased her pace. Have you ever watched the jet cars racing on the boulevards down that way? You're changing the subject. I sometimes think drivers don't know what grass is or flowers because they never see them slowly, she said. If you showed a driver a green blur, oh yes, he'd say that's grass. A pink blur, that's a rose garden. White blurs are houses. Brown blurs are cows. My uncle drove slowly on a highway once. He drove 40 miles an hour and they jailed him for 2 days. Isn't that funny? And sad too? You think too many things, said Montag uneasily. I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks. So I have lots of time for crazy thoughts, I guess. Have you seen the 200-foot-long billboards in the country beyond town? Did you know that once billboards were only 20 feet long? But cars started rushing by so quickly, they had to stretch the advertising out so it would last. I didn't know that, Montag laughed abruptly. So here I'm going to pause. This is kind of like our lives, because normally we're so busy running around this class, that sports practice, that job, that boyfriend, that girlfriend, that chore, that we talk about this a lot in class, but we don't have time to sit and think. So now we do. So my question is, and I'm curious just to throw this open to everybody, what have you been able to do in this last week or so that you weren't able to do when we were so busy with all these scheduled things? Anybody have any contributions on that?
Sleep.
You know, I've gotten more sleep too. That's a good one. What else?
I've been able to paint more. I've been painting.
That's awesome, Lily. What have you been painting?
Well, just like I'll just go like on Pinterest or something. And I'll get like ideas, and then I'll just paint like I painted this the other day. Can I flip the? Can you flip the? Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
It's a little cactus, and
Oh,
it says
that's awesome.
it says Yuma, Arizona, because I used to live there.
That's very cool.
But I just like paint like little backgrounds like that. And I've
Okay.
been able to do that more.
So we've got sleep and we've got painting. What else?
Watching shows that we weren't able to watch.
Oh, thank goodness we have more time to watch shows. I don't mean to be sarcastic. Are the shows at least like thought-provoking? Are you getting something out of them?
Well, I would watch dramas that's like 44 episodes long.
Okay. Well, when you think about it, it takes a long time to build up a story that you actually care about the characters so that you can really get involved with it. That makes sense. Anything else interesting?
Like eat healthier or like eat like fuller meals, like homemade,
Yeah.
and put like effort into it, and also like paint, but like not like canvases, but like because like I've been working on my room and my cabinet, so I've been painting my room, so remodeling it.
Right on. So it's really important to think about the things that we can do with quality. And that's what Clarice is talking about with Montag in this scene, because they're living in a society. And remember that Ray Bradbury wrote in the 50s, these books anyway, and he's thinking ahead to what our lives might look like. And for the most part, he's kind of right. One of the things about this book as we go through it, you're going to see a lot of predictions he makes about everything from healthcare to being a student to technology like earbuds that didn't exist back then. And I got to know, Freddie, what the ending of what was lame? I'm looking at the chat. Oh, on my block? Okay, cool. I was hoping you weren't talking about the book. All right. So when Clarice says these things to Montag, she goes on, bet I know something else you don't. There's dew on the grass in the morning. He suddenly couldn't remember if he had known this or not, and it made him quite irritable. And if you look, she nodded at the sky, there's a man in the moon. He hadn't looked at it for a long time. They walked the rest of the way in silence, hers thoughtful, his a kind of clenching and uncomfortable silence in which he shot her accusing glances. When they reached her house, all its lights were blazing. What's going on? Montag had rarely seen that many house lights. Now, do you remember in The Pedestrian, the one thing that distinguished Leonard Mead's house? Every other house only had one blue flickering light, and that was from the television set, right? This house, Leonard Mead's house, had all of its lights on because the person inside was actually like conscious. and thinking and talking. Well, what's going on? Montag had rarely seen that many house lights. Oh, just my mother and father and uncle sitting around, talking. It's like being a pedestrian. Oh, only rarer. My uncle was arrested another time, did I tell you? For being a pedestrian. Now we're in on the inside joke. You know something that no one else knows unless they've read The Pedestrian and they understand the illusion. My uncle got arrested for being a pedestrian. She's talking about Leonard Mead, the character. Oh, we're most peculiar. But what do you talk about? She laughed at this. Good night. She started up her walk. Then she seemed to remember something and came back to look at him with wonder and curiosity. Are you happy? She said. Am I what? He cried. But she was gone, running in the moonlight. Her front door shut gently. Happy? Of all the nonsense. He stopped laughing. He put his hand into the glove hole of his front door and let it know his touch. The front door slid open. Now remember, this book was written way before anybody had haptics, like you could put your fingerprint on your phone. That didn't exist back then. Now he's thinking to himself, of course I'm happy. What does she think? I'm not? He asked the quiet rooms. He stood looking up at the ventilator grill in the hall and suddenly remembered that something lay hidden behind the grill, something that seemed to peer down at him now. He moved his eyes quickly away. So there we've got a little foreshadowing. What a strange meeting on a strange night. He remembered nothing like it save one afternoon a year ago when he had met an old man in the park, and they had talked. Montag shook his head. He looked at a blank wall. The girl's face was there, really quite beautiful in memory, astonishing in fact. She had a very thin face, like the dial of a small clock, seen faintly in a dark room in the middle of a night. When you waken to see the time and see the clock telling you the hour and the minute and the second, with a white silence and a glowing, all certainty and knowing what it has to tell of the night, passing swiftly on toward further darknesses, but moving also toward a new sun. What? Asked Montag of that other self, the subconscious idiot that ran babbling at times, quite independent of will, habit, and conscience. Now, do you remember when we talked about the writing style that we see in this? How the sentences that are from Leonard Mead's inner thinking are longer and kind of rambling, but the sentences that describe the action are really direct. We see that here also. And if you weren't with us on Saturday, we talked about how Ray Bradbury really brings us into these little moments by describing the air, the feeling of the night, the sidewalk underneath your shoes. All of that's really specific. And especially if you're an AP student, we're going to talk about how that description and that sense of tone, the author's attitude towards the description, really gives us a sense of what he's wanting us to understand and feel as we read. He glanced back at the wall. How like a mirror, too, her face. Impossible. For how many people did you know that refracted your own light to you? People were more often, he searched for a simile and found one in his work, torches, blazing away until they whiffed out. How rarely did other people's faces take of you and throw back to your own expression, your own innermost trembling thought. So right now, I want you to take a moment and think of a person in your life. Is there anybody in your life that when you talk to them and you look at their faces in person, that you feel like in their face when you're watching them, that you can feel a little bit of yourself, like they're listening to you so closely that you know that your feelings are being shared by them? Anybody ever had that feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
kind of awesome, right?
It's
Can you,
really
can you
good.
describe that, Elba?
Well, I'm really close with my cousin, and so like when we talk, like it just feels like it's just us, and like I feel like I don't have to explain like what I'm feeling because I know that she's like it knows exactly what I'm talking about,
Oh, man.
and it's just great. It's a great feeling.
That's awesome. That made me happy just to hear that. Some of us don't have somebody like that because we're all so busy. But Clarice, even though she just met Montag, is giving him that same feeling. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like the eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating each flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the moment before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes? 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him. What a shadow she threw on the wall with her slender body. He felt that if his eye itched, she might blink. And if the muscles of his jaws stretched imperceptibly, she would yawn long before he would. Why, he thought of it. Now that I think about it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there in the street so damn late at night. He opened the bedroom door. Now, as he goes in, think about how different the atmosphere in the room describes the character even before we meet the other character we're about to learn about. It was like coming into the cold, marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon has set. Does anyone know what a mausoleum is?
No.
It's a place where the dead are kept, right? It's like part of a cemetery, but it's instead of an in-ground burial, it's above ground.
The walls.
Yeah. So right away, we've got the image of death and coldness. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut. The chamber, a tomb world where no sound, a tomb, again, death, where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito delicate dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. What do you think he's describing here? Have you ever been in the room when a friend has earbuds in and they're playing their music so loudly that you could almost hear that?
Mhm.
You know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The miracle here is that that didn't exist when Ray Bradbury wrote this book. He was imagining what that might be like. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long and now collapsing and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. That sentence actually appears twice. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. Check out this next sentence. This is one of my favorite sentences in all of writing. Listen to this. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. So he had been pretending to be happy even to himself, and with a couple of little questions, Clarice had made him realize, oh my God, I'm not happy. And now something was broken that he couldn't put back together. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed to the ceiling by invisible threads of steel, immovable, and in her ears, the little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, and an electronic ocean of sound of music and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her wide-eyed toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the third time. The room was cold, but nonetheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So, with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. So husband and wife, but they have different beds across the room from each other. What do you think this relationship is like for him? Anybody?
I don't want to say fake, but I feel like since he was talking to Clarice, I feel like he probably lost something and he's wondering like what his life is actually supposed to be about.
Yeah, I think you're right. What do you think about the fact that how can you imagine your own lives in the future? Let's say that you're married or you have a partner, you come home and the room is cold, they sleep in a separate bed, they're listening to music and they don't include you, and you go over to your own cold bed and the room reminds you of suffocating and death. Is that a loving relationship, do you think?
No.
No.
No, it sounds awful. So here's what I'm gonna think. because on Zoom, we've got a half an hour usually for these meetings, unless I up, if you guys say that, hey, we need more time each day, I'll up my subscription so that I can do a longer time with more people. But for now, what I'm thinking is, how, if you looked at the course blog today, you notice that I didn't put up a post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm thinking is we get to build this together as we go along. I heard that we have an opportunity to slow down and do some things that we didn't before. I heard some things in the reading that became important. And I'm wondering what you think would be important to post about today. What do you think would be a good topic to get people to put up on their thinking on their blogs? Because really, as we live through this moment with the coronavirus and everything else that's happening that's making things hugely different, we're kind of a lot like Montag. Our world's a little bit upside down. And so the best purpose I can think of to write is to express what's really true for us in these strange, wonderful moments we're sharing. So does anybody have any ideas about what might be a good focus for us? Or maybe just that? What do you think?
I think like so far, like in the story, like he seems a lot isolated, and like he's saying like questioning like his own true happiness. So it's like kind of not us questioning them, but like as we're isolated too, like it helps like reflect like things like when we first talked about like what do we get to focus on? Like, oh, some of us are painting, some of us are sleeping, eating, kind of like isolation, like how it affects us, kind of, I guess. I don't know.
I think that's brilliant. Who was doing the talking just now? I couldn't tell.
That was
Oh, it
Deanna.
was
Okay, awesome. Deanna, thanks for the suggestion.
I agree with her. Like, I feel like we should like focus on that and like how it's affecting us, good and bad, because I'm sure like most of us are like missing our friends and being able to be around them, and like it's kind of affecting us mentally.
Yeah,
So it's right about both.
I think that's perfect. So here's what I'll do. We're coming to close to the end of our half an hour. So let's pause here. And you're certainly welcome, by the way, if you ever want to read ahead, now that you know where to find the text, you're more than welcome to. We'll come back together at 1 o'clock tomorrow. But what I'm going to do now, after I get off this call, I'm going to post the recording on the course blog, and then I'll add a post suggestion based on what you just said. Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
And you know where to find me between now and tomorrow.
Yes.
For all the weirdness and unscriptedness of this was a pretty great start.
Yep.
I know for me, I don't feel so alone today. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
No problem.
I'm human too. I'm doing this too. And welcome to my living room. And yeah, if you can't tell, this is my bookshelf behind me.
Did you
I
color
like
code
how-
it? You were at a
Yeah, I like
library.
how it's color-coded.
You know what? I'll tell my wife you said so. She's the one that's the guilty party. I'm not nearly that neat, but yeah. Sometimes I have to remember what color a book is to find it. All right, you guys, I'll see you here at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And if you need me between now and then, send me an email or post on the course blog, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Professor.
everybody. Thanks for joining me.
Bye.
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 Bye.